Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and it is Father's Day 2022. Hopefully this is when this is going live. In my hand, I'm holding a box. In this box are some little bits and pieces from the Firetruck kit that my father started many years ago, and I finished a couple years ago. And we'll put a link up to this right around there, although that video hardly needs a link. It's certainly probably the most successful Father's Day video I've done. But anyway, we've got a ladder here. These look like the sort of hooks that firemen use for like poking holes in walls to make sure they're not on fire and stuff like that. We have a clamp. My dad used to like using these clamps when he would glue stuff together. This is the deck plate to go between the locomotive and the tender of MPC's The General, which, and I'll put another link up here. I reviewed the re-release of that kit, and we looked at the fact that my father had built that, and for whatever reason this is not on the model. It's in this box. Like I said, this is a box that came from some of my dad's possessions after he died, and that was in 2017. And then we have this. Anyone have any idea what this is? This is a front doorstep, and this is the mat for wiping your shoes. It's made out of Bristol board, illustration board, you know, the heavy duty white on one side, natural on the back. It's made out of 3 layers of that. And this is something that my father scratch built. Yes, he scratch built a front door step. Why, you may ask, did he scratch build a front door step? The camera saying, will you stop moving it around? I'm trying to focus on it. This is only part of that project. What he wanted to do was to make a building front that he could put on a shelf, and then he could put his fire truck in front of it. And I have puzzled over whether or not he was making this building front, whether this was when we lived in Montreal in the late 80s, or was this in the early 90s when we lived in Ottawa. I can picture him working on this building front in his workshop in Ottawa, but I keep thinking he started it in Montreal. And I think the reason I think that is because I was actually working on a companion piece for his fire truck that I never completed. But I started working on it in Montreal, and I also worked on it in Ottawa. So that's why I tend to conflate those two things together. But I'm 90% sure the building front he was working on when we lived in Ottawa, and he was working at National Defense Headquarters, which he sometimes called the Ivory Tower. So, we have this front doorstep. We don't have the rest of it. And with so many things that my father built model-wise, he started it, he got whatever percentage done, and then he lost interest in it. Dad, did you finish anything? I don't know. At any rate, it was a building front. It was basically a red brick building, and it had a big garage door that theoretically the fire truck would have come through. It had a second floor with some windows, and it had a front door and I think an office door off to one side. You know what? You'd have to put me under hypnosis to give you more details as to what that looked like. So, yeah. Why am I telling you this? So this is why I'm bringing this up. This is Dad's fire truck model. The one that he started many years ago, and I finished a couple years ago. as a Father's Day tribute. And as you can see, it's not really on display. It's actually sitting on the top of my radial arm saw, because that was an open surface. Because like everything else in my life, all the horizontal surfaces, this is Natasha's workbench. This is what's supposed to be my woodworking workbench, which, as you can see, is all covered in model making stuff. And of course, the radial arm saw is also covered in model building stuff. So, you may not think it, but this is actually kind of a fitting place to put it on display. This is a Sears Craftsman radial arm saw. I purchased mine shortly after I bought my first house. Way long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when my father and my mom first moved into a house, he bought a Craftsman radial arm saw, which had to be his prize tool. He loved that saw. What he could make with that saw was amazing. So, his Firetruck model has been sitting on top of my saw, slowly getting dusty. As appropriate as this may be, and being in a location where I can see it every time I come into my workshop, look at the cobweb. I think it deserves a better home. This brings us to this dusty shelf. Now, we're in what's supposed to be my family room, but it's kind of turned into my bedroom. But, as you can see, we have a bunch of unbuilt kits here, and right next to it we have a display shelf with cars and things on it. And way off in the distance there, you can see the hobby workshop area, and you can see a big part of the stash there. What I want to do is I want to take these kits off the shelf and put them somewhere else. And I want to put a building front, basically, of the fire department that he was trying to create many years ago. I want to recreate that. I want to put that in here, and then we'll have the fire truck on display in front of it. That's my plan. That's what I'm hoping to do here. So I think the first thing will be to take everything off this shelf so I can get an accurate measurement of it, so I know how big the building front should be. So this is what the space looks like with the models taken out, and as you can see, this shelf has seen better days. I got this secondhand. I'm not the one that beavered out the big chunk out of the back of it, but this is the space we've got. So we'll just plop the fire truck in here and see what we can possibly do with the space. Alright, so there's the fire truck on the shelf. And I think you'll agree with there's plenty of space for it, and we should be able to do a really nice building facade in the back. Now that I know it's going to fit, I can get some measurements as to how big our facade should be, and we can get to work on this project. Taking up the entire field of view here is 2 sheets of, you know what, I'm just going to call them Bristol board. If that's not what you call them, just wince quietly whenever I say that. So what I've always called it, on the back here it says it's Bainbridge, made in the USA, smooth side. It says illustration board right there. When I was a kid, it was always referred to as Bristol board, as opposed to the really cheap poster board that you find at dollar stores and things like that your kids will do their projects on. This is the heavier gauge stuff. And it's appropriate that I'm using this because this is the material that my dad actually made his building front out of. And I don't know where that is. It's gone. It wasn't in his attic. It wasn't in any boxes. I don't know where it is. So we're recreating this from memory. And this was not what I was initially going to use. I was initially going to purchase some embossed plastic that had brick on it that I knew was at my local hobby shop, or at least used to be there. And I went there and they just didn't have any. I'm going to be embossing a brick pattern on this using a malfunctioning ballpoint pen, which is exactly the way my dad did it. So So I'm going to start by drawing the building front on here, and then I'll know how much of the actual brickwork I need to emboss and everything like that, and then we'll move on. I have 2 sheets of this. I'm hoping to do most of it using the one sheet and keeping the other sheet maybe as a base that I can paint gray. I'll bring it back when I've done some drawing. So this is the back side of our illustration board, and I used a 2H pencil, so it's kind of hard to see, but you can see I've basically drawn out the equipment doors, and this is going to be a door going into the garage, and then over here is going to be kind of the main entrance, and then we have some windows on the second floor. Next step is going to be to cut these out and go from there. Okay, this is hard to do one-handed here, but yeah, it looks like the doors are okay. We've got about 6 or 7 scale inches on either side of those mirrors, which is plenty. This would be about the largest truck that would go through doors like this. We've got plenty of space overhead. So we've got the ground floor openings cut. I think I'm fairly happy with those. Now to do the upper floor windows. Alright, there's all the window openings done. Now it's time to emboss the brick. Alright, so this is my test piece. What I've done here is, believe it or not, this was a ballpoint pen that I specifically selected because it no longer worked. And you can see the top line, there's no ink. And then as I went on, it got stronger and stronger and stronger. Hopefully that won't be a problem. This is the way my dad did the brick on his original, when he was doing the his building front. Now, the only reason I want a ballpoint pen is so that I can emboss the surface of the cardboard. I don't really want red brick lines. So my next step here is I'm just going to take some craft paint, some flat red craft paint. I'm going to paint it on here. I'm going to see if, number one, is this ink going to come bleeding through. Because you know what, if I absolutely have to find a pen that doesn't work, I won't be able to find one. It is kind of handy actually having the ink work while you're doing it. Is this tedious? Yes. Is this going to bother the arthritis of my fingers? Probably. Do I have arthritis in my fingers? I'm going to have it in my fingers by the time I'm done this. So this is not the color I'm planning on using, but it is craft acrylic. And this is 3 coats. And you can still see the embossing. And the red ink I used doesn't seem to be a problem, so I'm going to go ahead and hopefully emboss the whole front of the building. And the sooner I start it, the sooner it'll be finished. Anyway, I'm going to be picking up more of a brick red in the next day or two. The horizontal embossing has begun. You can see I've still got a long ways to go. Alright, considering that pen was selected specifically because it was running out of ink, it did all of the horizontal lines. All of them. And, oh, maybe there's like 10 spots where it kind of cut out a bit. Okay, that was tedious. Now I got to put all the vertical lines in. Well, that was tedious, but all of the bricks have been embossed. I only made about 34 mistakes, but we're really going for a texture. We're not worrying about, you know, the fact that you look at it and say, oh, you got 2 seams on top of another one. So I am going to use the red that I have on hand, mostly as a primer, and then I'm going to go to an art supply store and find one that I really like. I finished painting all the brick, and hopefully it shows, but I used a basic brick red, that's actually what it was called, and then I highlighted some bricks with a color called wine, and then I mixed in some light gray with my brick and a couple other mixes in order to create a few more colors. And hopefully it shows on camera. It seems to in my viewfinder here. I'm not going to be modeling the grout. That will just take way too long, and we have to recall that this is a background piece. So I'm going to start working on the concrete work, like the cornice at the top and the trim at the top and bottom of the windows and the doors and everything like that. I'm using some bottles of paint here as weight, but you can see that I've put the concrete window ledges on, and then I've got the bits over the doorways in place here, and they were just glued on with some carpenter glue, and they were once again made with more of the illustration board, and you can see the top cornice of the building is on as well. So this is the base of our backdrop. The building front is going to be coming off the back here, and I've given this this is just basically gray primer, and I made sure that it wasn't 100% uniform because I wanted it to vary in color and tone, which is fine, but it's too gray. It needs to have some other colors in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mist some red primer and some black primer, and basically I'm just going to be shooting off into the air and allowing it just to kind of mist down onto the surface. We'll see how well this works, and if it ends up being a little too black and red, I can always hit it with some more gray. Alright, so there is the results of our black misting. You can see it's darkened it up some, and in a very ununiform way, which is what I was looking for. I'll let this dry for a little bit, and then I'll hit it with some red oxide. Okay, I've hit it with the oxide primer, basically red oxide. It actually, in person, looks more reddish than it does on camera, especially this area here. But my plan was to mist it one more time with some of the gray primer, so I should be able to tone that down just a bit. But the whole idea is I wanted it to be basically gray, but I wanted it to be a granular finish. That you could see there was black areas, brown areas, but mostly gray. We're looking at the back side of our building front here. Now, as you can see, there's been a lot of cardboard glued on, and this was to make the whole thing much more rigid and to avoid the inevitable curling that you're going to get with something like this. Especially when you've painted one side of it, you know, you're inevitably going to get some curling going on. And then when you have humidity, there's another potential source for warpage. So, yeah, and as well as that, each one of these is increasing the surface area for gluing it onto the base. So that has been taken care of, and if we flip it over, you can see that all of the concrete work has been painted, and I took my light gray and I mixed a little bit of brown in some of it, a little bit of brick red in some of it, just enough to change the tone a little bit between segments, because all it takes is some small differences in your aggregates and your concrete is going to look different. So that's what's been done there. Now we have to get on to, I think I'm going to start with the garage doors. They're going to be the biggest thing initially to get done. Here's one of our garage doors put together, and as you may have guessed, I'm using some of the cardboard strips that you get inside evergreen styrene packages. You know, it's free material. My father always used to use the cardboard inserts that came with cigarette papers. He had hundreds of those things saved up for some use at some point. So I may as well use something I've got lots of, which is these evergreen styrene insert cards. Now, some of them are a little lighter than others. I don't know when they faded, but at any rate, I'm going to be painting them, so no big deal. This is going to be glued behind, like that. And I'll give a coat of dark green paint. And we have all the windows framed. And you can see I've got the doors in. And this is the only door that has like a full coat of paint on it. This one needs another coat. And as you can see, this one I think has only got 2 coats on it. Yeah, one of the big drawbacks to craft paint is it doesn't always cover very well. So, but we will carry on. As you can see, I've got no paint at all on those upper windows. So I'm continuing with the assembly here. And you can see some red tape here. And that's holding in some acetate for our windows. And that's tuck tape. Tuck technical tape. Now I don't know what it's called in your area, but this is basically what builders use when they're putting the vapor barrier in your home when they insulate. And this is a roll that I had picked up from when I had done some renovations in my house, and I just figured, oh, I'll use the proper stuff. And this stuff sticks like you wouldn't believe. It is amazing how sticky this is, and it's really, so far as I can tell, it never really dries out like a lot of tape. Like packing tape, you can sometimes put on, and then a little while later, it just kind of flakes off. When I say a little while later, it's like a few years later, it'll flake off, and you're like, oh, this isn't good. But I decided to use this so that at a later date, my windows don't come loose. So as you can see, I've got 4 of them on. I still have another 5 windows to go. I'm getting ready to put the last 2 sections of blackout on the windows here. And before I do that, I want to put some posters in, e.g. the, I don't know, I'm going to say the fire chief or, you know, their PR officer or whatever has got some safety posters that he's kind of put in the front window. So you can see I've got a selection here. And I just randomly grabbed these offline. And I was aiming for ones that had kind of a 70s look to them. You know, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. I didn't care if they looked a little dated. These are the sort of things you put in the window and then you don't think about them for a couple of years, whatever. Mostly because of the age of the Firetruck. So I'm going to be installing these on my blackout material here. And that way when I put them in the window, you know, they'll be facing out. The posters have been pre-mounted on my blackout pieces of cardboard here, and then they're going to be taped in behind the windows. And as well, you can see I've got the fire station sign. It's pre-glued on a piece of black cardboard. That's going to be trimmed very close. And my no parking signs are ready to be glued onto my doors. Well, hopefully I'm not doing this too soon. As you can see, I've got a liberal amount of glue on my bottom sill. I'm still going to spread it out, and of course I still need to spread it on my thinner areas here. But this is going to be holding it onto my base. I know it's a high stress location, but I do have quite a bit of surface area. See how this turns out. I've got a little bit of squeeze out at the front of the building here. It shouldn't be a big problem. I'm just going to have to touch it up paint-wise. But given that this is a very high stress join, I think I would rather have a little bit of squeeze out to form a fillet or a fillet. You can see all the clothespins I have on the back. Basically squeezing stuff together. Well, you would see it if the camera would focus. There we go. You can see all the clothespins I've got. And anywhere where I don't have that base plate, I've got the glue ganged up on there. Okay, this is a bit of a freaky angle here, but you can see I've got the building flat laying on its back here. And I'm finding that it looks a little bit sterile, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some weeds kind of just at the base of the wall here. Just some growies. And I'm going to be using some Woodland Scenics ground foam here. Medium green. And yeah. And I think that'll liven things up a bit. So my glue has dried on my growies here, on my weeds and plants and things that are kind of, and this is just the sort of vegetation that grows along the foundation wall of any building. Now you could argue that the fire department would probably keep these at bay a little bit more than this. But you know what? I think it adds a little bit of life to the structure. So, of course, now we're coming to, I think, probably the second most important part of this assembly after actually putting the fire truck down, and that is we have the front door step that my father built for the original back wall, which we don't have, but at least we have this part here. And I've been planning on having it go there all along. The main entrance I decided to go without an actual front door step, e.g. you just step up into the building, but I definitely wanted to use this right here. With putting this in place, we have the integration of the part that he made with the overall backdrop. So this is just about ready to go on the shelf. We won't put the fire truck on it until we actually put it over on the shelf. Now, I put a couple of inexpensive puck lights in, and for some reason or other you have to go through all these bizarre colors first. I might end up switching these. I'm not real happy with them. They're very, very cool white, but they only cost a few dollars a piece, and unfortunately they don't give you an indication as to whether they're warm white or cool white off the package. And now we have the real star of the show. Got the fire truck in place. And as you can see, we've got lots of space for other fire apparatus and things to go in here as well. I think the cool thing about this project is now I have a backdrop that I can use for photographing other 1/25th and 1/24th scale models that I build. And, you know, I mean, pretty much anything could be sitting in front of a fire hall or a generic building like this. So this is actually something I can use for other projects in the future, at least for the glamour pictures for the channel. So thanks for watching this year's Father's Day tribute. I am happy with how it turned out. It's not exactly the same as what my dad had done, but as I said earlier in the video, you know, I can't remember exactly what that looked like, but this is very similar. The green paint, the red brick, it's very, very similar to what he had in mind with his. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.